Welcome to Physics 100. I'm Professor Curtis, instructor for this course, and this is the lecture video for Chapter 15, Temperature, Heat, and Expansion. Let's get started. So, just like lions and tigers are related animals, but not exactly the same, temperature and heat are also very related concepts, but they are not the same animal. Temperature is the average kinetic energy of the atoms or molecules of an object. So you've got, whether you're looking at a solid, a liquid, or a gas, the atoms of that material are vibrating. And so there's a speed associated with that vibration, but not every atom is vibrating at exactly the same rate. So you've got different speeds that are going on inside the material. And so you take the average of those speeds, and that's going to relate to the kinetic energy that the vibrations have for the objects, and that's going to be the temperature. So temperature is by definition an average quantity, and it's relating only to the speed of that vibration that you see in the atoms or the molecules. Heat, on the other hand, is thermal energy, and like any other type of energy, it can, come and go as it will. But because it's thermal energy, it's more of a total quantity. And it relates to the speed of atoms or molecules, but it also relates to the mass of the object. So how much you have is going to determine how much heat energy can be coming in or going out or remaining inside the material. Now, because heat is thermal energy, we can just measure it with units of energy, which is the joule. And that's what we do. But temperature is a little different. Now, temperature, average speed of the molecules as they're vibrating. So we could use meters per second because that's what we typically use for speed. But the distances that are involved here are really, really small. And so, the numbers we get up wouldn't be very meaningful for most people. And so we're using a different unit for temperature. There's basically 4 different units that we could use, each based on its own separate scale. The 2 basic scales that we have are Celsius, which is the SI system, and Fahrenheit, which is the US customary system. Let's talk a little bit about each of these scales and where they came from. So, Daniel Fahrenheit, physicist living in Germany, of course, the town where he was living in today would be located in Poland. But at the time that he was alive, Poland was actually ruled by the Germans. So he developed a temperature scale based on some experiments that he was conducting, and he used 3 reference points for his scale. The first was a mixture of ice, water, and ammonium chloride, and he assigned 0 degrees to that point. And then he took a mixture of ice and water and assigned 32 degrees to that point. And then he made his best estimate of the human body temperature, which, you can see his estimate of 96, not too far off from the actual average value. So the temperature scale was later defined based on the freezing point of water and the boiling point of water. So he just took 32 and 212 and then just divided by 180, and that's the difference between the 2 points. Now, this is obviously something that has some basis in science, and we know that this is the way he developed it because he left his lab notebooks that explain all of this. But there's a really interesting legend that explains why the Fahrenheit scale was all screwed up. Living in what we know today as Poland, in the winter it gets really cold. So one day he's just, really cold, blustery winter, snow and ice everywhere. He's working on his temperature scale, and so he makes a thermometer. And he goes out and he just basically, places it in the snow. And he sees where it ends up. And he says, he marks it there. He says, there's 1 point. And he goes back inside, comes back out a little later, and sees that it's moved a little bit. And so he marks that and says, there you go. The difference there is 1 degree. Now, we know that's not true because, the notebooks that he left us to say that this is the way that he actually developed a scale, but it's kind of a cool little legend when you think about how screwed up the Fahrenheit measurement system is. Of course, we're the only ones who really use this temperature scale. I think there's like like 3 or 4 other countries that use it, Barbados and a couple of other little minor nations like that. Don't really have widespread use. Most of the world has switched to the SI system, and it'd be nice if we could switch to the SI system too. But wow, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but back in the 1800s, the U.S. actually adopted the SI system. It was an act of Congress that said the official measurement system of the United States will be the SI system. So we actually got back on board in the late 1800s, but Congress did not pass any legislation that forced industry to use the system. And so industry said, well, we're not going to make any change because that's too costly, having to change all these measurements and all the plans and blueprints and designs and everything that we got going on here. No, we're not going to do that. So we're just going to keep doing what we've always been doing. And that's why, the United States has been lagging behind, because there's no real force on industry that's motivating them to make the change. The Celsius system was developed a little bit later, so you can see Anders Celsius, the guy who developed the system, was in Sweden. He was an astronomer. And towards the end of his life, he developed the system. Now, at this time, Fahrenheit has long since passed. So he's looking at Fahrenheit system and saying, man, this is all screwy, man. We had to think of something that makes a little bit more sense. We want to connect it to, it's not that Fahrenheit wasn't connected with nature, but we want to connect it more fully with nature. So he was using water for his reference points, and I got to tell you, that was a great choice, because water is just like a basic substance in nature. I mean, without water, you don't have biology, you don't have chemistry, you don't have physics, you don't have any of the sciences. So water is a great choice to be using. But you'll see here, he actually set the freezing point, and he said that's going to be 100, and then he said the boiling point was going to be a 0. That's not a typo. He actually had it the reverse of what we know it to be today. And then there was a fellow Swedish scientist who took his work and looked at it. If you've studied biology, you may know the name Carolus Linnaeus. He's the guy that came up with the whole, classification hierarchy for how we, organize different living organisms. So, the whole species, genus, order, all that business, that's Linnaeus's big thing. And he looked at this temperature scale that Celsius devised and said, you know what, this looks like a good idea, but I think you got your scale backwards here. You really should be having the freezing point should be the lower number and the boiling point should be the higher number. So he reversed it from what Celsius had originally developed, and that's the Celsius scale that we know today. And it was basically called the centigrade scale until 1948. The name centigrade comes from Latin, centi meaning hundredth and gradus meaning step. And that's the way the scale was originally devised. You've got one point that's 0, another point that's 100. You take 100 steps in between those 2 points, and there's your scale. In 1948, there was this huge international conference about weights and measures, and this is where they tried to put some, what's the word I'm looking for? Conformity. They try to streamline a lot of this stuff, get everyone on board with the same convention. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was, we're not going to call this centigrade anymore. We're going to call it Celsius. So that's the official name. We're not going to call it degrees centigrade. It's not going to be degrees Celsius. So that was back in 1948. Now, there's another temperature scale that we're going to talk about very briefly, because we're not going to see it in this lecture, but we will see it again when we talk about thermodynamics here in a future lecture. And this temperature scale is based on the work of Lord Kelvin, Scottish engineer, really influential in the field of thermodynamics. And it was that work in thermodynamics that led him to propose a new temperature scale, where we're using the same gradations as the temperature scale that Celsius devised, but we're going to set 0 at absolute 0, which is the lowest possible temperature you could have. The units of this scale are named after the guy that gave us the scale, Lord Kelvin. And under his scale, water at standard pressure is now going to freeze at 273 Kelvin and will boil at 373 Kelvin. And as I mentioned previously, this is a very useful scale if you're working in thermodynamics. And we'll see how useful that scale is going to be when we actually study thermodynamics in Chapter 18. So all this talk about heat and temperature, how are they actually related to each other? Well, they're related through a concept called specific heat capacity. Different materials have different capabilities for transferring and retaining heat. So different materials are able to conduct heat. Some are better conductors of heat than others. Some are better retainers of heat than others. And this is related to a concept called specific heat capacity. So because they have these differences in their capability for transferring and retaining heat, these different materials are going to require different amounts of heat to experience the same change in temperature. And this capability is what we call specific heat capacity. It's the capacity of this specific material to transfer and retain heat. Now, we simply, when we talk about this, we simply abbreviate it and say specific heat, and mathematically we use a lowercase letter c to represent specific heat capacity. The more official definition is the quantity of heat measured to change the temperature of a unit mass of a substance by 1 degree. But if you look at the official definition, we're talking about the same thing. Conceptually, it's the same thing. How much heat do you need to change a set amount of mass, a set temperature difference? Here in the table, you can see the specific heat for all sorts of different types of materials. The actual value that a given material has can vary with pressure. And for gases, because gases also vary with, the density varies not only with pressure but also volume, you're going to get differences with volume. Now for solids, there's not going to be any variation there with the pressure because the density doesn't change with pressure. For liquids, that's not true. We know with liquids, the density can change with temperature, and temperature is related to pressure, so it can change with the pressure. For gases, it can change with both pressure and volume. So there's really two different values for specific heat that a lot of materials have, because a lot of the heat retaining and transferring ability that we're using with materials, we're talking about materials that are in the gas state. So there's two values of specific heat. Specific heat under conditions of constant volume, which is C sub V, and then specific heat under conditions of constant pressure, which is C sub P. So when you don't have any subscript specified, constant pressure conditions are going to be assumed. That's just a convention that's made. A lot of reference sources, they don't have a subscript there. So when you don't see a subscript, you can just assume we're talking about constant pressure specific heat. Here's the equation, the mathematical relationship that relates heat with temperature. Q equals Cm delta T. So here Q is the heat energy that's transferred to or from a substance, and we measure that in joules. C, of course, the specific heat of the substance, measured in joules per kilogram degree Celsius. Mass is represented with the letter M, and that's in kilograms. And then, of course, delta T, the change in temperature of the substance measured in degrees Celsius. Let's run through a sample calculation together to show you how to use this equation. Suppose we have 10 kilograms of brick at 20 degrees Celsius. How much heat would we need to add to the brick to raise its temperature to 70 degrees Celsius? Okay, fair question. We need to know the specific heat of the brick, and typically this is something that would come from looking at a table. Often when you're working on a problem for an assignment or a test, you're going to have that value given to you in the problem statement. But, in the real world, we typically look this stuff up in a table somewhere. And when we do that for brick, we find our specific heat value is 840 joules per kilogram degree Celsius. So now we've got everything we need to solve this problem. First, we're going to write down our equation, which is Q equals Cm delta T. And we can take that delta T and we can actually expand it out. That delta T is the change in temperature, which is really the difference between the final temperature T2 and the initial temperature T1. Now we can substitute in what we know. So the specific heat, the 840, the mass of the brick is 10 kilograms. The final temperature T2 is 70 degrees Celsius. The initial temperature T1 is 20 degrees Celsius. We run the math and out comes 420,000 joules, or 420 kilojoules. And that's really all there is to it. So now let's give you a chance to run through this. In your workbook there, you've got 3 different materials that are listed, and you're going to be raising the temperature of 5 kilograms of each of those materials by 50 degrees Celsius. So if the material is iron, how much heat do we need to add to raise that temperature difference? And if the material is aluminum, run the same calculation. And if the material is water at 20 degrees Celsius, how much do we need to add to get it to raise the temperature 50 degrees Celsius? And then finally, what do we notice about the results? So go ahead and stop the video here and then work this out, and then come back to the video when you're ready and we'll see how you did. Okay, here we go. So here are the numbers that you should have calculated out for each of the materials. Iron with about 112 kilojoules, aluminum 224 kilojoules, and then, wow, water over 1 megajoule. So water is in LIGO by itself. Now, let's look for a moment at the iron and the aluminum. So aluminum about twice what we see in the iron. And this explains why a lot of premium cookware is made with aluminum, because a lot of the common cookware that you see is made with iron, but aluminum with twice the heat capacity, it's got twice the ability to transfer and retain heat. So it's much easier to get a smoother, evenly distributed temperature on your cooking surface when it's made out of aluminum than it is out of iron. And that's why a lot of premium cookware is made with aluminum. It goes back to the specific heat of the material. Now water, as we said, off in a field all by itself. I mean, it's like an order of magnitude above what we see there with the iron. And this is one of the reasons why water is used in so many engineering systems that involve transfers of heat, because it has a really high specific heat, which means it's got a super duper ability to retain heat, to transfer it from one place to another. And so, that, in addition to the fact that it's cheap, makes it a material of choice for a lot of, fluid dynamics applications where you're going to have to transfer heat from one place to another. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.